Do you speak a language well enough to live and get by in a country you were not raised, yet still find a work culture hard to navigate? Have you ever wondered what it's really like to freelance or start a business in a country you weren't born in, especially as a skilled professionals? Hi everyone and welcome to Voices Across Borders, brought to you by Multicultural Talent Network. I'm Mina Kim Mak. In this podcast, we go beyond the resume to share real stories from professionals navigating life and career across borders. You will also hear from researchers as well as solo episodes where I dive into key topics shaping the global professionals. I hope you will find insight, connection, and maybe even a little encouragement along the way. Today's guest is Maya Kominz, a true bilingual talent, fluent in both Japanese and English, with a strong foundation in project management. Born and raised in the US, grew up in bilingual household, she later moved to Japan for college, bridging cultures through both education and career. Maya has worked in Japan at a top consulting firm and a well-known global brand. Now she is forging her own path as an independent project manager in Japan. With a proven track record of leading cross-functional teams and managing complex projects across borders, Maya is on a personal journey to redefine what work truly means to her as a bilingual professional navigating two cultures. In this episode, we'll talk about how Maya adapted to the working culture in Japan and how she found her path to becoming a freelancer. Thank you, Maya, for joining us today. When you started college in Japan, you already spoke Japanese pretty well, but you had not gone through the Japanese school system. Based on your experience, what were the biggest upside and challenges you faced during the transition?
Nice to see you, Minasan. I would say that the biggest benefit of going to college in Japan was that my tuition was significantly cheaper than what it would have been if I went to a private college in the US. When I was choosing colleges, I was deciding between a private university in the US and a university in Japan. Going to Japan would be like 1/7 or 1/10 of the yearly cost. When I was thinking about the primary benefit and motivating factor for me, because I do think that the US is generally known for having really good university curriculums and a good college system. I knew that going in, but still the cost was the primary factor for me to choose Japan. I think looking back, actually, my college network has proven really valuable over the course of my career. So I do think that also has turned out to be a benefit.
That's true. It can be quite expensive in the US. Do you know anyone you met in Japan who might have gone there for financial reasons?
I had a lot of friends who were studying abroad for middle school and high school and then decided to come back to Japan for college. I think those people were Japanese, though. For them, it was more about returning home versus taking advantage of the cost. It was a bit of a rare scenario in my case, and I'm guessing that the reason why I was able to make that decision was because of my Japanese language skills. I knew that I could complete the curriculum in Japanese. So that's why I even had that option to be able to choose between the two. I would say it was probably a pretty uncommon decision.
And what were the challenges?
Some of the challenges I faced were that I had to adapt to the differences between the US school system and Japanese school system. I think it's pretty similar K through 12 and college. In Japan, it's very much test based. Most of my course grades were determined by final exams. And because it's like that throughout even K through 12, and a lot of Japanese students go through a rigorous college entrance exam period as well, they're very good at taking tests and they're very accustomed to this type of like learning and this type of grading. But growing up in the US, my grades were usually determined by a number of things like essays, class participation, projects. Of course, exams were a part of it. But I was the type of student that was never the best test taker, so I would like work hard at the other areas to bring
Right.
up my grade. So I definitely felt I was at a disadvantage compared to other students at school with everything being heavily focused on exams in Japan.
After college, when you're looking for a job, did your English fluency mostly help you, or was there a time you felt like it actually worked against you? So, what was it like looking for a job as a bilingual student in Japan?
It always worked at an advantage for me for finding jobs. It never felt like a disadvantage. Being able to speak English like always worked as an advantage, but I should caveat that was probably because I spoke Japanese fluently as well. I think back when I was applying for jobs, which is about 10 years ago, I think English only jobs were still pretty rare. They're becoming much more common now. So you can find jobs where that don't require Japanese more often these days.
Oh.
I think back in the day it was really rare. So I think they appreciated my fluency in English with on the basis that I was fluent in Japanese. So the bilingual aspect was what they liked. If I had only been able to speak English, I probably wouldn't have qualified for a lot of the jobs.
You mentioned something interesting. So, there are jobs currently in Japan that require only speaking English.
More people are at these kinds of jobs, and sometimes it's a bit more technical, like engineers. I'm a project manager, and so these types of jobs might require more bilingual skills. But I think the more technical the job is, the easier you can get the jobs only requiring English.
Oh, that's interesting. Thanks for sharing that. I grew up in multiple countries, so I know that living in a country where you speak the language is one thing, but really getting used to the societal unspoken rules, working culture, and daily interaction with locals, which also including colleagues, especially somewhere you didn't grow up, is a whole different challenge. How did you manage them, and what helped you settle in?
This was really difficult, especially at my first job, where I was basically trying to learn the workplace culture. I was working at a consulting firm for my first job, trying to gain basic consulting skills at the same time. Consulting isn't necessarily the easiest industry to be working in terms of the work hours and the expectations. I definitely had a hard time understanding and get along with my boss at the time. He was Japanese, and he was someone whose whole career had been working in a very strict work environment with long hours and was used to pushing his team really hard. But I think he also knew that times were changing. Ultimately, the way I navigated all of that was by working really hard and trying to excel at work first and then speak up more about ways we could maybe improve the team culture, the working culture. Later on, I felt more comfortable to be myself. I think nowadays, when I get on a new project or I'm working with a new client, I do feel more comfortable speaking up and being myself earlier on. But as a new grad, it's always harder to speak up because you're still learning the ropes and you have such limited skills that I think, regardless of whether it's Japan or not, you don't really feel empowered to make major changes in regards to workplace culture and whatnot. So I just had to work really hard. But once I did, I felt comfortable kind of navigating all of that better. If at all possible, trying to go for a job where you at least have some non-Japanese colleagues, if it's not in your direct team, in the same department or somewhere near you. I do hear that when you're like the only foreign person in a team full of Japanese people, it can get pretty difficult in terms of getting your viewpoint understood. It's just like the power of numbers in a way. You don't really feel empowered to speak up, or even if you do, it gets misunderstood. Now, going back to what I said, that there are quite a few kind of workplaces that are quite diverse, and there are many different types of, or many like employees from different countries. When you have a good mix of those types of people on your team, then I think it becomes a lot easier to manage, even if your manager is Japanese, there's enough people with different perspectives that those perspectives get respected. It could be difficult if to navigate all of that if you're the only foreigner on a team full of Japanese people. It seems to be a lot more possible or a lot easier to find that kind of environment now. Whereas maybe like back when I started working like 10 years ago, I don't think it was as common. I think it's becoming a lot easier to work in Japan as a foreigner. I think a lot of it is the tech industry and how prevalent like that has become in the past 10 years. So there are a lot more tech companies that are trying to hire engineers, and that whole direction and movement in that direction has helped with that.
After working at a big, well known global companies, you decided to go out on your own as a freelancer. What pushed you to make that decision? Did being bilingual and bicultural make the decision easier? Or was that background part of what caused or led you to take that leap?
I was at my second job where I was a project manager. This was after I quit my job at the consulting firm. And I think this was winter 2020 to spring 2021. And I was not really enjoying this job to the point that it was affecting my mental health a bit. I was dreading working every day, even though it was just at home. It felt like it took a lot of energy to go face my computer and actually start working. And I started thinking, what about this job was not aligned with how I wanted to work? I came to a couple of realizations. One was that I didn't care about kind of the impact of the projects that I did. Another realization that I had was that I would begin to feel empty when talking about promotions or raises with my manager. When I thought about getting promoted, that feels like I'm going deeper into a space that I don't want to crawl out of. I was thinking that maybe leaving a corporate environment could be good for me and to see if that could help with my mental health, but also helping me find out the direction that I want to take my career. Ultimately, I decided to just quit without anything lined up and see what happens. Interestingly enough, my boss at that company that I was at introduced me to one of his former colleagues who was working as a freelance consultant. That introduction led me to my first and main gig once I went freelance. That's how I started as a freelancer.
Were you a little scared when you just started because it's something new in a country that you're not born and raised and you are not familiar with the system? What was that like?
I was not really scared about being able to do the job. I was a little more scared about whether taking a step in this direction and going freelance was going to ultimately negatively affect my career. I just really had no way of knowing at that point, but I just decided to take that step anyway. I think I just had to prioritize my
Right.
mental
No,
health at
yeah,
this moment.
absolutely.
If you're working as a full-time employee, there are a lot of benefits that you get. So there's definitely that aspect that's positive, and you don't really get that if you're freelance. In my case, there was this trade-off of I don't get the benefits, but my salary increased significantly, so it still made sense. I can't say that would make sense for everybody. All these factors helped me make that decision and be confident about that decision. But definitely, it was a bit scary taking a completely new step in that direction.
Someone who is bilingual and bicultural, what do you think would help others like you settle into life and work in Japan, whether freelancing or in a corporate job? This could include anything from getting visas and everyday logistics to be part of the community.
Unfortunately, I can't give the best advice when it comes to
Right.
visas and logistics because I have Japanese citizenship and still don't really face those challenges that many people face when coming to Japan. In regards to community, I think that this can be hard, especially in a city like Tokyo because it's such a big city. If you're starting to work in Tokyo, it makes sense to be really proactive in creating a community for yourself, whether it be like via work colleagues or like hobbies or meetups or something else. I think I've seen a lot of people who come to Japan and start working. It takes a while to find their footing, and it can be very hard to meet people and find a community if you're passive about it. I think you can end up feeling pretty lonely, but I do think that even if you're active, it still might take time. And this might not be just Tokyo, any big city anywhere in the world. I think it can take some time to find your footing. So just having realistic expectations might be the advice.
In any big city, if you start out in a college or school, I think the barrier to making friends feel a bit lower. But when you begin as a professional working for a large corporation, it can definitely be harder to build those connections.
I could add, when it comes to Japan specifically, I think a lot of people do find comfort in trying to make friends with other expats versus Japanese people because I think Japanese people already have their own friends, their own community. Also, they socialize in a slightly different way than people from abroad. I don't think that's a topic for today necessarily, but it's a whole another can of worms. I would say like, don't get discouraged, and it sometimes can take a little more time for Japanese people to open up.
Yeah, I think it just takes time, especially when you're in a new country. Like you said, people socialize differently, and it's not that they are being mean, it's just a different approach. It can feel disappointing at first, but every culture has its own way of building connections. Thank you so much, Maya, for spending time with me today. I enjoyed our conversation and appreciate your insight.
Thank you so much.
If you're interested in reaching out to us, you can contact us at Multicultural Talent Networks or Mina Kim Mok, MINAKIMMOK, through LinkedIn. Thank you so much for listening.